contributing to an international effort to contain the threat. During the Afghan mission, Canadian Armed Forces took the fight to Al-Qaeda and the Taliban in rough terrain and dangerous circumstances. As always, our troops fought with courage and professionalism. That knowledge and expertise gained at great price is of immense value to those on the front lines against ISIS today. Mr. Speaker, throughout history, Canada has stood with our allies against tyranny and brutality for the cause of freedom. Today's efforts follow that tradition. Today, Mr. Speaker, I want to pay tribute to our Canadian forces contributing to our international efforts to contain, deplete, and destroy this threat to world peace.
The honourable member for Markham Unionville.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday evening was the start of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. Rosh Hashanah marks the start of 10 days of reflection and atonement for Jewish Canadians, culminating on Yom Kippur. It's also a time of celebration, as one gathers with friends and families to reflect on the year gone by and look forward to the promise of the future. York Region has a thriving Jewish community, and I would like to use this moment to recognize them for their innumerable contributions to Canada. On behalf of the residents of Markham Unionville, I'd like to wish all celebrating a happy and healthy New Year. May 5775 be a year of peace, prosperity, and happiness for all. Shana Tova.
The honourable member for Calgary East.
Mr. Speaker, this past Sunday marked the one-year anniversary of the Westgate Mall attack in Nairobi. This is a mall I visited on many occasions on my previous visits to Kenya. This attack claimed the lives of 67 individuals, 2 Canadians, Nadeep Damji and Anne-Marie Daslow. Anne-Marie, a distinguished public servant who served at Canada's High Commission in Kenya, lost her life in this senseless act of violence perpetrated by Al-Shabaab. Our thoughts continue to be with the victims and families affected by this horrific attack. Terrorism remains a serious threat in East Africa. That is why we have been directly supporting international efforts to combat Al-Shabaab in Africa, in particularly through our support of AMISOM. We will continue working with Kenya to fight terrorism, which is a menace with no boundaries. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Trinity Douglas.
The Conservative government is moving a shutdown debate for the 76th and 77th time. These Conservatives have shattered by a mile the previous records for shutting down debate. 45 times by the government of Brian Mulroney, 35 times by the Liberals under John Chrétien, and now 77 times by these Conservatives. I'm deeply gratified that most members, including most Conservatives, supported the member for Halton Hills Reform Act last night. But empowering MPs also means allowing every member an equal opportunity to speak. Mr. Speaker, government members should be embarrassed to turn around today and vote in favor of time allocation, in favor of shutting down debate, in favor of denying members the opportunity to speak. Mr. Speaker, closure is an attempt by the government and the PMO to undermine the rights of all members of this House. This is a special place that needs to be defended, Mr. Speaker. Canadians deserve better.
That's right. Honourable member for Cypress Hills, Grassland.
Mr. Speaker, our government recognizes the vital role small business plays in our economy. That's why we're putting money in the hands of job creators with the Small Business Job Credit. Our plan lowers EI payroll taxes by 15%. It will save small businesses over $550 million. Wow. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business called the move big news for small business. But our announcement left the Liberal leader scrambling. The next day he released his back-of-the-envelope EI policy. Mr. Speaker, he should have taken his time. He doesn't even know the cost of his plan. What's worse, it actually encourages businesses to fire employees. It's so far off base that the member from Wascana has been naming economists as supporters of the plan when they actually oppose it. The Liberal record on EI is clear. Raiding the EI fund, supporting a 45-day work year and its 35% premium hike, proposing massive tax hikes. We're lowering taxes for 90% of all business. That's a record to be proud of.
Oral questions. Tess Jones-O'Neill, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday in New York, the Prime Minister announced that he was considering sending even more Canadian troops to Iraq. Why did the Prime Minister wait to be out of the country to announce that he was considering a more significant military participation in Iraq? Why is he refusing to answer these questions here in Canada?
Make such important announcements in the United States and not here in Canada.
We've been very clear that we will assess the non-combat mission that we were involved in Iraq at the end of the 30-day period, and we just recently received this request from the United States, and of course we will review that, Mr. Speaker. I think that's only fair and reasonable in terms of our support for our allies and support for what we are doing in Iraq.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Would be to release the letter so Canadians can know what the request is from the Americans and exactly when it was made, because the word few has taken on quite a new meaning with this government. The
Prime Minister also announced yesterday in New York that the United States asked Canada to send more troops to Iraq. How many additional soldiers were requested by the United States, and how many additional soldiers does the Prime Minister intend to send? Minister of National Defense.
69 members of the Special Operations Forces, Mr. Speaker, in Iraq. And that being said, there's this request from the United States for additional support, and this will be part of the review by the government, included within the 30-day period, and we'll make a decision on that, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Cabinet is one thing. That's one of the branches of government. Parliament is where elected officials make decisions.
The Prime Minister also informed Canadians, also still in New York, that we had the second biggest number of soldiers in Iraq after the United States.
Foreign Affairs Minister said that a status of force agreement with the government of Iraq had not even been completed. Has a status of forces agreement been completed, and when will Canadians see that text, or is that going to be released in New York as well?
Whatever is released to the leader of the NDP party, he won't be satisfied, he'll be unhappy, Mr. Speaker. But we are on the right track fighting this Islamic State, Mr. Speaker, in this part of the world, and I can tell the individual that the 69 members of the Canadian Armed Forces have the full permission and cooperation of the Iraq government, and they are welcome, and then, as they have been requested by the government of Iraq.
The UN Refugee Agency now says that Turkey needs urgent assistance, caring for the approximately 130,000 new refugees who have streamed over the Syrian border in just the last week. 130,000 new refugees on top of the over 1 million already in Turkey. Did the Prime Minister discuss this refugee crisis with UN officials while he was in New York? And what aid will Canada provide to Turkey to deal with this latest surge in refugees?
Citizenship and immigration, Mr. Speaker, well as the Leader of the Opposition well knows, Canada's been at the forefront of the response to refugee resettlement from Iraq for years now. We're well over 18,000 resettled Iraqi refugees in this country, and we have a plan to fulfill our full commitment to resettle 20,000 Iraqis, and then to move on to resettle 5,000 Iraqi and Iranian refugees now present in Turkey. So we're at the forefront of helping our Turkish allies respond to this unprecedented humanitarian crisis.
Mr. Speaker, let's try to get a real answer from that minister and not more wordplay. Canada has promised to accept a total of 1,300 Syrian refugees. We often hear him talk about people who are under the protection of Canada. Here's the question. Exactly how many of them have arrived here in Canada? He knows the number. Canada
promised to accept a total of 1,300 Syrian refugees. The minister often plays on words. I want a clear answer. Of those 1,300, exactly how many are here in Canada? The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
More than 1,500 Syrian refugees are present in Canada, Mr. Speaker.
Please die.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday Canadians learned that the United States asked Canada to play a greater military role against the Islamic State. The Prime Minister informed the Wall Street Journal that he is considering the request, and he will decide how Canada will participate. My question is simple. Will the government commit, first of all, to provide Parliament with all of the details on this request from the United States? And secondly, will the government commit to consulting Parliament if they consider broadening Canada's role against the Islamic State? The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
We reached out to the opposition parties. We have given them briefings on this. Myself and the Minister of Foreign Affairs appeared before a parliamentary committee, and we've been very clear. We have a 30-day non-combat role in Iraq at the present time, and we will assess that. And as I indicated, we've received this request for additional military support from the United States.
Canadians learned about the U.S. request for a larger military role against ISIL from the Prime Minister's comments in New York and not from a statement to Parliament. In the UK, Prime Minister Cameron recalled Parliament to debate his country's role in the fight against ISIL. Before extending the 30-day deadline for Canada's mission, and before any larger role may be decided, will the Prime Minister inform Parliament of the nature of the U.S. request, and will he commit to holding a debate in Parliament?
As I've indicated, Mr. Speaker, this government has been very forthcoming, and again, we've invited the honourable member and their opposition days if they want to discuss this or want to have more debate about it. They're certainly welcome to do that. But that being said, we will analyze this non-combat role we have at the present time and come to some conclusions at the end of that 30-day period. But I would invite the honourable member, indeed all members of the House, to watch the Prime Minister tonight at the United Nations before the General Assembly.
Mr. Speaker, the Ministers of National Defence and Foreign Affairs committed publicly that the government would engage and inform members of this Parliament about any extension or changes to the deployment of Canadian Force members in Iraq. The best way to inform opposition members and all Canadians is to hold a debate in Parliament. Before extending the current mission on October 5th and before any larger military role is assigned, will the Minister inform Parliament what the U.S. has requested, and will he commit to holding that presentation in Parliament?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
As I pointed out, there has been considerable discussion and answered on this side of the House. Forthcoming information has been provided by the government, as well as including the Foreign Affairs Minister and the Prime Minister. I'm surprised but they have their opposition days. If they are concerned, if they're upset about some of these issues, they're certainly welcome to have additional debate on that. But we'll continue to be very forthcoming, Mr. Speaker, on this issue.
Speaker, the official opposition won't content itself with a presentation, nor will we consider it sufficient to have a debate. The question for the government is, will there be a vote in the House of Commons?
What we have been very clear is that we are in support of those individuals who are opposing this monstrous organization in that part of the world. And again, the Prime Minister has been clear on that subject, but nothing will make the NDP happy, Mr. Speaker. Nothing. Not debates, not polls, not statistics, not information about this. Nothing will make them happy, Mr. Speaker. But we will stand with our allies.
The Honourable Member for London Shanks.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to temporary foreign workers, this government's actions never match its rhetoric. Conservatives have now been forced to bring in penalties for employers who violate the temporary foreign worker program. But imposing sanctions depends on catching violators. And now we learn not all inspections include a site visit. You can't just look at paperwork and conclude everything is fine. When will Conservatives finally get serious about cracking down on abuse in the temporary